Right.
Cool. Um, so I'll start us off, and then and then I'll give it over to you guys. Right now it's still setting up. Just so you know, there is a 20-second delay as well. But we are live. So hello, everyone. Welcome to our first segment of our Facebook Live. It is Literacy is Life. Again, welcome whether you're watching it live or watching it on replay. Thank you for joining us. This campaign is kind of meant to deconstruct what we already know about literacy and develop new meanings for it. And this campaign also gives us a great opportunity to highlight amazing community members that are working to provide resources and creating initiatives, really, to strengthen literacy all over Houston. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Jessa. I'll be your moderator throughout this series. Just a little bit about me. I'm a community engagement Vista at the Alliance. And so we have some great guest speakers today. So our first segment is called Literacy Redefined. So we are really trying to find new meanings about literacy and kind of breaking down those barriers that we already have. So our guest speakers today are Kanisha Allen from the Alliance and Federico Salas Ndari from the Mayor's Office. So Kanisha is the Director of AmeriCorps here at the Alliance. And we also have Federico here. He is the Director of the Mayor's Office for Adult Literacy. Welcome. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. It means a lot for me, or it means a lot to me to have you guys speak on your experiences about adult literacy and how literacy has impacted you, really. So let's just start off with Kanisha. Tell me more about yourself, how your role is impacted by literacy. I know that's a loaded question, but tell me more. I think you're muted.
Always something in the Zoom. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jessa, for coordinating this discussion. My name is Kanisha Allen, Director of the AmeriCorps programs at the Alliance. And so in that role, I supervise both AmeriCorps State, which is direct service, and AmeriCorps Vista, for the Alliance, and I've been in this role almost 3 years. And then prior to coming on board with the Alliance, I was with another organization, the Houston Center for Literacy, for 4 years, also serving with its staff, full-time staff for AmeriCorps. So a lot of folks may not be familiar with AmeriCorps or what it is. I often say it is the domestic Peace Corps, right? So AmeriCorps is a network of local, state, and national service programs that connects over 80,000 Americans each year in intensive service to meet community needs in education, environment, disaster recovery, public safety, homeland security, advocacy, so on and so forth. Our AmeriCorps members, because they are not volunteers, so folks that come and serve with AmeriCorps serve more than 2,000 plus nonprofit, public agencies, and community organizations each year. They serve in full-time or part-time positions over either a 10 to 12-month period. The service members that are within the programs within the Alliance, they support adult literacy agencies throughout the city of Houston and helping those agencies increase capacity by providing direct service as well as project-based work to aid in improving the literacy landscape for adult learners in Houston.
Great, thank you so much. I mean, AmeriCorps has done so much for the community, providing, members who has helped providers create, again, as you said, increasing the literacy landscape in Houston, and that ties directly into how the mayor's office also works with providers, connecting community members with educational and literacy resources. And so, Federico, tell me more about your role as the director of the mayor's office.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting us and for coordinating this series of talks. I'm so glad to be here with you today and with Kenisha, whom I have known for a few years since she was in her previous role. So I'm glad to have this conversation with her. Mayor Turner created this office, the Mayor's Office for Adult Literacy, in 2019 with a vision. The vision is seeing a Houston in which every individual can obtain the skills, has the skills that are necessary to prosper and to reach their full potential. And that vision in itself is telling us something important about literacy. Literacy, as conceived today, is not just about reading and writing, which is our traditional view of literacy. The view of literacy today, what we call functional literacy, is significantly changed. And it is about those skills needed to prosper and to reach one's potential. When we talk about reaching a person's potential, we are not talking only about reading and writing. We are talking about reading, writing, doing basic math, solving problems using computers, using digital devices, thinking creatively. That is the literacy that we need today. That is the literacy needed to succeed in the family, in the community, and in the workplace. I came to this role after more than 30 years in adult education and adult literacy, starting many years ago in a small nonprofit CBO, a community-based group, and then working for Houston Community College and for what was then called North Harris College, is now part of the Lone Star College system. And then I worked for TEA, for the Texas Education Agency, in the office of the state office for adult literacy. Later, I was a literacy specialist for the Texas Center for the Advancement of Literacy and Learning, TCOL, at Texas A&M, that today is a provider of professional development resources for adult literacy and adult education providers in the whole state. I became co-director of that professional development effort out of Texas A&M University, and then finally joined the mayor's office 2 years ago. My role, you mentioned the relationship with the Alliance. Alliance is one of the providers in a large network of providers that my office is working with. There are in our network more than 60 providers of adult literacy services, from the very large ones like Houston Community College to very small organizations that are community-based, grassroots organizations in the community that are serving a need, that are teaching some basic skills, that are teaching skills for the workforce, that are focusing on the needs of the workplace and the workforce, as the pandemic has forced us to rethink how we approach training of the workforce.
And I totally agree with that. With you, what really stuck with me with what you were saying was the traditional definition of literacy is no longer the definition. With the change of the pandemic, with the change of how educationally our community members perform at work, perform at home, perform at school, it is always evolving, and it's complex and a lot more than what maybe our community members or our audience members might know about. And so that brings me into one of my questions that either one of you can start. Why do you feel that adult literacy is misunderstood? What is the disconnect between us, who might know so much about literacy, but maybe our community members um, might not understand? Or why do they have a different understanding of literacy?
Tanisha, if you allow me, I will start with this. I think that literacy is a misunderstood topic, among other reasons, because we don't do a good job of advocating for the adult learner, the literacy learner. To begin with, yes, it's misunderstood because most people think of literacy in terms of the traditional learn to read and write. It is also true that most people in the community have a preconceived notion as to why an adult may have come to be illiterate and not have that ability to read and write. Today, what I want to make sure that is clear, because it's part of the misunderstanding, is that if we are looking at 1 in 3 adults in Houston or in Harris County being functionally performing functionally low or performing at the low levels of functional literacy, what that means is not that we are dealing with adults who don't know how to read and write. They may, a few of them are actually illiterate. They don't know how to read and write. But most of us, most adults, whether educated or not, fall along a continuum. Literacy is a continuum. It is not a yes or no equation. It is a continuum where there are people who can read and write, but their skill level is not sufficient for the demands of today's economy. They're not sufficient for the demands of the digital environment, the digital culture in which we live. So they may have known how to read and write. They may actually be very educated in their native language, but they come here and they are at a disadvantage because of their language. They don't know English, and they don't know many of the skills that an educated person knows in this country. So why is it misunderstood? Because of an issue with definitions, and also because we don't talk enough about exactly who we are helping and why we are forced to reinvent, reimagine what literacy education is. Kenisha, do you agree with my take?
I do agree with your take 100% unequivocally. And I guess kind of on the other end of that spectrum, because education is my background, right? I'm originally from Flint, Michigan. One of my very first jobs was an English literature teacher for high school students, right? I taught 10th through 12th grade. From there, I went to work in higher ed at the University of Michigan. And part of my role was recruitment for a specific program, but we were doing a lot of pre-college training and educational enrichment activities. And we had quite a few students within our pipeline pre-college programs that were either going to be first generation college students, to where English may not have been, their first language, or for whatever reasons, they were the first in their families to graduate high school. And so, completing that work, I worked in that field for 8 years, moved to Houston. I've been in Houston for 8 years. One of the very first job I got when I came to Houston was within HISD as a literacy coach for third and fourth grade students. From there, I started work as an ESL instructor, which I still do to this day part time in the evenings and on the weekends. And that is what led me to full time work with AmeriCorps, whose focus for these specific programs has always been adult literacy and workforce readiness. And so, as a result, like over the course of 20 years, my whole professional career, um, I'm hearing now that I've been relatively siloed and that I am largely surrounded by educators, right? From K through 12 to higher ed and to adult education. And so we know what we don't know. we 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 don't have, I mean, we have some misunderstandings, but we don't, in many ways. And so we feel like our role as not only educators but facilitators of educational processes is really to aid and be a part of the solutions. And so I think just within the personal and professional community that I surround myself within, there is not the misunderstanding, right? But I do recognize that outside of, I guess, kind of my bubble, there are misunderstandings, and I think what I'm hearing, right, and learning in this conversation, I'm not privy to those because we're so immersed in the work, right, and being driven to be um, a part, of something, bigger than ourselves. Like with the AmeriCorps members, be involved in something that is bigger than ourselves. So we are trying to really find, the solutions within and internally.
Right. Let me say one thing, because you actually hit the nail in the head when you said we oftentimes live in our little silos. So within education, we understand what we are talking about. But of course, we don't live in a just education community. We live in a community that has many needs and many components that intersect each other. And our adults, the adults that we serve, of course, have many needs that intersect each other. I think that we need to do a better job of explaining literacy to healthcare workers, to explain literacy to industry and corporations, to employers, to members of other agencies in the community. The reality is that the pandemic showed nationwide that the uneducated are more likely to suffer from the consequences of the pandemic than the well-educated for many reasons, one of which is access to literature and to information. Another aspect of literacy that is normally ignored is that if your skills are limited, for example, using technology, you may not be able to perform the jobs that are now being in demand in our area in Houston. So that you have all your life maybe had a job for 20, 25 years, had a job that require you to read at about this level. And the technology jobs that are now in demand, the jobs, for example, in Houston's health facilities that are at the intersection of technology and health, they require to read up here. There is a gap. So it is important to understand two things. One, when we talk about functional literacy, we are not saying, as Jessa mentioned earlier, we are not talking about a deficit. These people don't have a deficit necessarily. What they have is a gap between current skills and skills that are needed to succeed. Another very important thing that we cannot forget is the systemic component of the issue of low literacy. If you live in certain impoverished communities, if you live in certain neighborhoods in Houston, or in, to be frank, in any major urban area in the nation, or in many deprived rural areas in the nation, you will have very likely low functional literacy. Why? Because you don't have access to the tools needed to educate yourself. You don't have access to the right schools, or you don't have public libraries. You are not able to avail yourself of internet, of digital devices, of good data plans. So you don't access the information economy. You cannot access it. So to me, it's important to understand poverty is the cause of illiteracy or low functional literacy, and not the other way around. You're not poor because you don't know how to read and write. You don't know how to read and write because you're poor to begin with. You're born in a poor community. And that is something that we in the mayor's office have to address. And we are addressing it. And that's why many of you, the providers, helped us work on the development of an adult literacy blueprint that the mayor of Houston adopted just 2 months ago, June 8th. The blueprint was made possible with the generous support of the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation, our partners. And what we did is work with over 100 members of the community, educators, corporations, health providers, employers, service agencies that came together to talk about this issue as it affects every aspect of life in our community. Uh, low literacy intersects every aspect of our community. And that is something that people don't understand. So we work together on developing this blueprint that I hope that everybody hearing us or listening to us can go to our website and check out the blueprint and look at the goals that we have to address the issue of low functional literacy in Houston over the next 15 years.
Yeah, of course. And going back to your point about, the gap that we are witnessing with these community members, because the skills, again, are not developed enough. It's not to say that they are somewhat lacking of literacy. It's just there is like a gap that we are seeing. And so, yeah, to answer your question, you kind of answered your own question of what might the mayor's office be doing to combat that, right? To close that gap, because essentially we want to be at that part, but our community members are not meeting that. And so with the adult literacy blueprint, right, you outlined certain solutions in order to meet that need. And I wanted to ask Kanisha, what are AmeriCorps members doing to close that gap? AmeriCorps does talk about helping providers, but what do they do to essentially meet them where they are? Because sometimes we do need that, or community members need that, because we can, again, like us as educators, we know we have the knowledge, but it's about getting that knowledge to the ground floor that's missing. So Kanisha, what do you think?
So I think two things in response to Federico talking about the gap, right? And kind of like this idea, kind of like I mentioned about being in a bubble. The bubble is not necessarily a bad thing because in that bubble with me are my students, right? And I feel it is my role, right, as a facilitator across the span of just, all of my work as a facilitator of educational processes is to empower them, help empower them as much as I possibly can through language, right, and the development of specific skills that they need to help navigate systems, right, and these systems to where folk that fall into different categories, right, and check certain boxes to where they're just historically disenfranchised, right, and marginalized. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that our AmeriCorps members, specifically with our programs, the focus being adult literacy and workforce readiness, our AmeriCorps direct service members serve full-time and they work directly in classrooms as instructors, either as adult basic education, GED, HSC prep, and ESL instructors. And so they are in the classrooms, they're in the organizations, they are on, on the ground, right, doing that day-to-day work in that form of service. Our AmeriCorps Vistas, of which you are one, Jessa, our VISA perform what I call behind the scenes work, right? So it's project-based capacity building that supports the work that our direct service members are doing in the classrooms, right? So our Vistas either serve in one of three roles: resource development, volunteer coordinators, or community engagement. And through those roles, they are able to help our partners increase and expand the work that they're doing within their adult education, adult literacy, and workforce readiness programs already, right? So for example, the Alliance, well, I won't use the Alliance as an example. Chinese community centers. We have had a long-standing partnership with Chinese community centers for our AmeriCorps programs, and they have a brand new community engagement vista that will start this month. And that person will really help them focus on community outreach, and marketing of their currently existing adult education programs. And so we don't necessarily see that Chinese community centers is lacking in that area, but we see that through conversations with them, we can help expand. And so for the greater, right, the greater Houston area and even beyond, help these community members that we've talked about that don't know, right, and have misunderstandings about literacy. Our vistas in that role, specifically in that role, will create content, right? Create marketing, various marketing campaigns to help Chinese community centers get the word out even more beyond what they've already done, to talk about all of the wonderful things that they're doing. So our members, they're tackling it from the front end, being in the classrooms, and then behind the scenes.
Yeah, and you need both of that because you with, again, literacy being so complex, there needs to be those type of different characters, different roles in certain places that
Yes.
need, yeah, that people need that, to kind of be reminded and to kind of push them towards action. And talking about action, as we close out our discussion, which was a really great discussion. Again, thank you both for visiting me in
Thank
my
you.
little box.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna propose a question. It's a pretty loaded question, a very general question, but maybe in a few sentences, as educators, maybe a practical solution. How do we get Houston to be 100% literate? It's a hard question, but I believe in you guys. So who wants to start?
Well, it is a hard question and it is a very hard goal to achieve, but
Yes.
it will take commitment, it will take collaboration. We all need to work together,
Mhm.
and we need to change the perceptions of who is the adult we are serving and what is that we are doing to serve them. If we can change that perception and come together consistently to advocate, to educate the community at large about functional literacy, and to show them how to get involved, how they can help, how they can help us achieve the 7 goals that we have in the blueprint.
Mhm.
Each of them will be a goal that someone in the community can associate with, either health or workforce or family literacy or digital literacy. These are goals that people can associate with. Get involved. That is how we are going to solve the problem in the next 15 years. Get
Yeah.
involved.
Thank you. Kanisha?
Yeah, and kind of in support of that, I'm in agreement with everything Federico just said. And from what I'm hearing, to me, and what I was going to say in response to your question, Jessa, to me that sounds like access. It sounds
Mhm.
like just,
Yep.
equitable access, right? Access to the
Bingo.
tools, to the resources, education opportunities, educators' guides, right? So access for everyone, and specifically, the folk that are, underrepresented, that are underserved, that are marginalized and disenfranchised, right? So the access with the intention of providing knowledge, for skill development to ensure folks are able to lead successful lives in the way that they define success.
Yep. Yeah. And I completely agree with you guys. And this is why we're having this. We need, another factor, another layer to this is to just have conversation, open conversation about what might be lacking, what we can improve on, and what we're already doing. Right. So the mayor's office has a great adult literacy blueprint. You can check it out at their, I don't remember your guys' website, but if you look up mayor's office for adult literacy on Google, it will pop up. If you want to find out more about AmeriCorps, go to the Alliance, tx.org, our website, and there'll be an AmeriCorps tab, or visit Serve Houston on Instagram to find out more about Texas adult, I think Texas family literacy is what it's called. And yeah, this kind of includes our segment. Our next segment will be on Wednesday, August 18th at the same time, 5 p.m. We will be covering literacy on the job. So we will have workforce instructors and HR directors kind of talking about how workforce training and literacy go hand in hand. Again, thank you to Kanisha and Federico for
Thank you.
joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessa, for putting it together.
Yes.
Our website is Houston, Texas, just one word, HoustonTX.gov/adult literacy.
Yep.
And I look forward to the next event. Look forward to joining you.
All right,
Yes.
cool.
Thank you again, Jessa.
Thank you so much. See you.
Take care.
Everybody enjoy your evenings. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye, everyone.